Welcome to Monsters, Maybe, the podcast, the official deep dive companion to Wilson H. Bard's Monsters Maybe series. Each episode, two voices sit down to pick apart one book or one big idea from the world of Wally, Medusa, and the monsters who might not be monsters at all. Before we get into it, two quick things. First, the voices you're about to hear in this discussion are AI generated, built to walk through the Monsters Maybe world in conversation form. Second, this is a full spoiler discussion. We cover complete plot details, twists, and endings from across the Monsters Maybe series. If you haven't read the books yet, consider this your spoiler warning.
So I want you to picture Medusa for a second. Right now, in your mind's eye, you're almost certainly imagining this cold, pristine marble statue, right?
No, totally. The classic monster.
Exactly. You're picturing this terrifying creature lurking in the shadows of some, subterranean cavern with the snake hair writhing.
Waiting to turn some tragic hero into stone, yeah.
Right, because that is the visual propaganda we have literally been fed for centuries. But I want you to take that image right now and just entirely shatter it.
Just throw it out.
Yeah, throw it out. Picture that exact same mythological titan sitting in a remarkably cozy, rain-swept cottage kitchen. And she is wearing a violently bright, poorly stitched yellow smiley face sweater.
Which is such a wild image.
It really is. And she is meticulously, intensely focused on wrapping a 50th birthday present for a goldfish.
It's just brilliant.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We're taking you entirely off the map of classical mythology today into this secret, fiercely protected corner of history where the line between reputation and reality just completely disintegrates.
It just falls apart completely.
It does. We are exploring the excerpts from Wilson H. Bard's Memoirs of Arrogance and Excellence, which is, of course, the coda to his renowned Monsters Maybe series.
You know, the contrast you just painted there with the sweater and the goldfish, that is the beating heart of Bard's entire project.
Yeah.
Because our mission for this deep dive is to really deconstruct the architecture of monstrosity. We are going to examine how history's most infamous, universally feared creatures like the ones society has explicitly taught you to be terrified of.
The ultimate bad guys.
Right, the bad guys. How they actually function as this deeply committed, radically gentle, chosen family.
I love that. Radically gentle.
Yeah. We're going to tear apart the mechanics of how they maintain these incredibly elaborate, decades-long social fictions entirely out of love, and, how they navigate a world that has fundamentally and perhaps deliberately misunderstood who they are.
Right. We really have to reframe everything we think we know. Like, what if the Minotaur isn't a bloodthirsty beast, but a highly sensitive theater kid who was obsessed with stage blocking?
Yeah. Or Pegasus being a high-end luxury auctioneer who gets deeply offended by tacky ceramics.
It's so good. We're going to explore the lengths these so-called monsters will go to just to preserve a single moment of joy for a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, we kind of need to establish the physical and emotional geography of this world first.
Definitely.
So let's start on Misty Island. It's Medusa's household. The text describes it smelling of rosemary, salt, wet stone, and this faint ozone-like bite of old magic.
Such a great atmospheric detail.
Right. And descending through this heavy rain is a massive, terrifying vulture named Virgil. But he's not circling a battlefield or anything. He is carrying a very awkwardly wrapped, slightly damp package.
Just doing his job.
Exactly. He lands and he rings a little brass bell at the kitchen window, specifically the third sill from the herb wall.
And that bell ring, that's the mechanism that introduces us to Delia.
Yes.
Because Virgil rings it exactly once, since he's a professional courier and professionals do not repeat themselves. And Delia, who is Medusa's assistant of 2 years, steps forward to receive it.
And here is the critical thing about Delia.
Right. The foundational detail, the piece of information that changes the entire trajectory of her integration into this household, is that Delia is blind.
Which just completely rewrites the power dynamic of a mortal encountering a Gorgon. I mean, think about how much of monsterhood, how much of that propaganda and fear relies entirely on the visual.
Oh, absolutely. The myths literally tell us that looking at Medusa is what kills you.
Right. Her reputation is entirely bound up in what she looks like. The horrifying spectacle of the serpents. But Delia is immune to that spectacle. She never saw the serpents.
Yeah, she never had to cognitively overcome the terrifying visual reputation that precedes her employer. She circumvents the visual propaganda entirely.
It's such a clever narrative choice.
It really is. Because of her blindness, their relationship couldn't be built on that traditional mortal-monster dynamic of visual terror. It wasn't even built on that cinematic trope of a mortal, like, bravely overcoming their fear to see the good inside the beast.
Because there was no fear to overcome in the first place.
Exactly. Delia simply needed a job, and Medusa needed an assistant who wouldn't accidentally turn to stone while taking dictation.
Which is very practical.
Very. It allows the relationship to be built on ordinary, mundane humanity. For the first time in perhaps thousands of years, Medusa is permitted to just exist in a space without being perceived as a threat.
And because Delia cannot rely on sight, Bard provides us with this incredibly rich, dense, sensory mapping of how she understands the house.
Oh, the sensory details are gorgeous.
They really are. She knows this environment with a granular intimacy that, you or I probably don't have with our own homes. She navigates not by light, but by acoustics and texture.
Right.
She knows the specific low sigh of the wooden shutters when the wind shifts from the east. She knows the exact dry scratch of Medusa's quill on parchment, which usually means Medusa is drafting a highly sarcastic reply to a customer who doesn't understand the physical limitations of loom weaving.
And that quill scratching is such a brilliant narrative anchor.
It is.
It strips away the mythic scale, right?
Yeah.
And replaces it with the mundane frustrations of a small business owner dealing with unreasonable clients. Like, Medusa's an artist, a weaver. She's annoyed by bad commerce, not by invading armies.
Yeah, she's not plotting the downfall of Athens. She's just trying to run her Etsy shop, basically.
Yeah.
And my favorite detail in Delia's sensory map is the pantry. She knows the exact hollow resonant note that the third pantry shelf makes when someone has taken the honey jar and failed to put it back.
That is so specific.
Right. You only learn a house like that if you were completely fundamentally safe inside of it. She is deeply integrated into the rhythm of this life.
Yeah.
But, navigating a physical space in the dark is one thing. Navigating the emotional space of an immortal employer is another. And Bard gives us this fascinating look at how Medusa establishes boundaries.
Right, because there are no literal keep-out signs.
No, there are no heavy iron padlocks on forbidden doors.
The boundaries are entirely invisible. They are architectural concepts constructed purely out of mutual respect and observation. Like, consider how Medusa communicates that she is working. The text defines this not as Medusa locking herself away in a tower, but as a period of, quote, reflective silence.
Reflective silence, right.
Medusa might be counting thread, she might be adjusting the chemical ratios of a dye, or handling delicate snakeskin oil. And Delia just knows that during this atmospheric shift in the house, you do not interrupt, you don't even knock.
She enforces this invisible boundary so fiercely that she even makes sure the ravens living upstairs understand it. Like, Delia enforces a period of reflective silence on a flock of birds, completely, regardless of whether it aligns with the raven's personal beliefs about making noise.
The birds must respect the boundary.
They must. But it raises a really interesting psychological point for you, the listener, to consider. Like, think about how you establish boundaries in your own life, especially in new relationships or shared living spaces.
Yeah, you rarely hand a new roommate a formalized rule book.
Right. You rely on them picking up on your social cues. The closed bedroom door, the headphones on, the quiet morning coffee. The boundary is upheld by the other person's willingness to read the room.
And Delia reads the room flawlessly most of the time. But, every system of rules has its stress tests, its unwritten exceptions.
Yep.
And the stress test in this scene arrives in the form of the package Virgil just dropped off. Delia traces the twine on the package. It's tied with string that looks like, as Bard describes it, an apology and a dare at once.
I love that description. And the handwriting on the package is deeply familiar to Delia, even by touch, because it's from Cyrus the Cyclops.
Oh, Cyrus.
Yeah, and this creates an immediate conflict of protocols. Protocol A is that Medusa is in a period of reflective silence and must not be disturbed. Protocol B is that the package is from Cyrus. And Cyrus is prone to sending things that are, highly important, incredibly perishable, deeply confused, or currently alive.
You never know with him.
Exactly. So Delia applies logical deduction and decides that Cyrus overrides the reflective silence. She has to deliver this right now.
And this decision forces Delia out of her known sensory map. She steps outside into the rain-softened mist. She walks past the kitchen garden where the stone path divides.
Right.
The broad, well-worn path leads to the main workshop, which is a safe, understood location. But there is a secondary path, a narrow, mossy, rarely used curve of stones leading behind the workshop toward these smaller, older outbuildings that Medusa essentially actually never speaks of.
And of course, Delia takes the narrow path.
Of course she does.
And as she walks this path, she experiences this moment of profound psychological hesitation. Because Bard points out that this path is not forbidden. If Medusa wanted it forbidden, it would have a heavy iron lock, or she would have used her calm, terrifyingly flat voice to say, no, dear.
Right.
This path isn't forbidden. It simply carries the heavy, suffocating weight of being unoffered.
Unoffered. That's such a specific distinction.
It really is. It's the medicine cabinet metaphor. When you visit a new friend's house, you know you are allowed to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
But you also know, without anyone ever saying a single word, that you do not open the medicine cabinet.
Yeah, you just don't.
Right. The unoffered space requires this massive leap of presumption to enter.
And Delia pushes through that presumption by reminding herself of her status. She has been an assistant for 2 years. She is not a curious child trespassing. She is a professional woman carrying a message about a package delivered by a vulture to a gorgon from a cyclops.
Which is such a funny thing to try to ground yourself with.
It is. The sheer administrative absurdity of that sentence grounds her. She reaches the end of the path and finds an old, oiled wooden door with no exterior latch. She knocks softly. And the door simply shifts inward with a low sigh, yielding to her presence.
That sigh of the door is the threshold. By crossing it, Delia steps out of the domestic safety of the cottage and walks directly into the physical manifestation of Medusa's internal, centuries-old psyche.
Yes.
She walks into the owl room. And I want to spend some time here because the sensory shift is immediate and overwhelming. Delia steps inside, and the air changes. It smells of ancient dust, dry cord, old sea air, and the sharp tang of beeswax and lavender.
The distinct scent of things that are kept carefully and touched obsessively.
Yeah.
She reaches out into the dimness and something brushes against her shoulder. Her fingertips find the object. It's a macrame owl. It is small, no larger than her palm, constructed with these violently tight, mathematically precise knots featuring 2 small beads for a face. She feels along the line suspending it, and she finds another owl, and then another.
And the acoustics of the room open up. She realizes the ceiling is vaulted incredibly high, and as she traces the lines, the sheer scale of what she has walked into hits her. Because there aren't dozens of these owls. There aren't hundreds.
Right.
There are thousands upon thousands of these tightly knotted little owls hanging from the rafters in absolute suffocating silence. It's literally an ocean of them.
And then the silence shatters. Because Medusa speaks from the corner of the room. Her tone is bone dry and defensively sharp. She says, I assume that the house is on fire. Or raiders have come up from the docks. Possibly the ravens have unionized, though I would have expected more shouting.
Which is just a brilliant deployment of sarcasm as a shield.
Oh, completely.
Medusa is an immortal titan, but in this moment she is incredibly vulnerable. Her assistant just accidentally walked into her most private, exposed psychological space. So Medusa immediately retreats behind the armor of a boss.
She is trying to reestablish the invisible boundary that Delia just accidentally walked right through.
Yeah. And Delia is mortified. She tries to explain that the door just opened, that doors traditionally lead somewhere, and Medusa fires back that doors traditionally lead somewhere is a common mistake.
But Delia can't let it go. Her hands are still touching the thousands of knots. She asks Medusa why they are all owls. Medusa admits she simply hasn't found another shape that holds the same amount. Delia asks, the same amount of what?
This part is so good.
And Medusa's response is one of the most defining philosophical moments of the entire text. She says, memory, pain. Occasionally one wears the other's cloak, and one must wait a few decades before sorting them properly.
See, this blew my mind. If we actually think about the mechanics of immortality, we usually romanticize it. We think about endless time to learn languages or build wealth.
Yeah, being a vampire billionaire.
Exactly. We rarely consider the catastrophic neurological and emotional burden of centuries of accumulating grief, betrayal, and memory. When you live for thousands of years, your memory doesn't just get longer, it gets endlessly crowded.
Right, because the human brain is designed to forget.
Yeah.
We process, we overwrite, we let go. Because if we held on to every slight, every heartbreak, every moment of terror over an 80-year lifespan, we would literally collapse under the weight of our own consciousness.
And now multiply that by 3,000 years.
Exactly. Medusa cannot afford to just let memory drift. She has to externalize it, physicalize it, or she will drown.
But I have to challenge this method, though, because looking at this from a modern psychological perspective, if you walked into a friend's house and found thousands of physical totems representing every single painful thing that had ever happened to them,
You'd call someone.
we would call an intervention. We are taught that holding on to trauma like that is a form of emotional self-harm you are supposed to process and release. And Delia essentially asks this. She asks why Medusa makes the same agonizing thing over and over again. Isn't this just a pathological hoarding of pain?
That is the textbook modern assumption, yes. But Medusa is operating on a timeline where modern psychology completely fails. When Delia questions the repetition, Medusa delivers this devastatingly beautiful rebuttal. She says, "And every wave is water." That does not make the sea repetitive.
I mean, stop right there. That line is absolute perfection.
Yeah, it changes the entire paradigm. She isn't hoarding, she's curating. She tells Delia that some of these owls are here simply because she wasn't ready to throw them away yet. She explains that it takes centuries to learn to pick the owl that matters.
Wow.
Yeah. She is taking the formless, chaotic, overwhelming ocean of her eternal memory, and she is binding it. The physical act of macrame, the tension, the pulling of cords, the structural physics of the knot, that is how she asserts control over her own history. She is archiving her humanity.
Archiving her humanity.
Yeah. Yes, because pretending you can just wipe the slate clean when you are immortal is deeply dangerous. If she were to just let go of thousands of years of pain, she would lose her anchor to reality. She would become the hollow, unfeeling monster the history books claim she is. The owls are proof that she still feels.
The physical tension of the knot is such a great metaphor. She is literally tying up loose ends of her own psyche. She even points out the first owl she ever made. She mentions it was from a life she had before this one.
Right.
And we, the readers, we know the classical mythology. We know the horrific trauma of Medusa's origin, the violation of the temple, the curse from Athena. But Medusa doesn't trauma dump on Delia here. She doesn't explain the curse. She just quietly acknowledges the depth of her own timeline and says the owls are not for other people, they are for her.
And precisely at the moment the scene threatens to become too emotionally dense, Bard masterfully deflates the tension using the most grounding, mundane element possible. From the floor of the room, there comes a long, wet, deeply irritated sigh.
Enter old Brutus. We have to talk about Brutus.
Oh, yes.
He is this massive wolf dog who has apparently been sleeping on the floor this entire time. The text describes him as mostly retired, morally inflexible, and selectively deaf, having mistaken stiffness for dignity for at least 30 years.
Brutus is the anchor of reality here. You have this sweeping conversation about immortality, the ocean of memory, the curation of centuries of pain, and right in the middle of it is a snoring, flatulent, ancient dog.
It's perfect.
It really reminds the reader that this room isn't just a mystical vault of trauma, it is a working room in a home. Brutus huffs, clearly deciding that profound emotional revelations between us humans are a highly insufficient reason to disturb a good nap.
His sigh snaps Medusa out of her vulnerability. She readopts her dry tone and says, right, so is it the fire or the raiders?
Yeah.
And Delia finally gets to deliver her message. A package from Cyrus arrived, delivered by Virgil.
And at the mention of the words Cyrus and package, old Brutus miraculously overcomes his selective deafness and moral inflexibility. He heaves himself off the floor and follows them back to the kitchen, entirely because years of Pavlovian conditioning have taught him that Cyrus's packages usually involve food.
And Brutus's optimism is incredible. As the text notes, it has survived his old age, captivity, rescue, and Medusa's various vegetarian stew experiments. He settles under the kitchen table, fully prepared to be proven right. So the three of them, Medusa, Delia, and the expectant dog, return to the kitchen, and Medusa finally approaches the package.
And, Medusa's meticulous curation of her own trauma in that room is actually the psychological foundation for what happens next in the kitchen.
Oh, how so?
Because she understands how deeply memory can break a person, which is exactly why she goes to such extreme, almost ludicrous lengths to prevent a different kind of memory from breaking someone else.
That makes perfect sense.
She looks at the envelope attached to the package. She recognizes Cyrus's handwriting immediately. It is raised, massive, and written, as Bard says, with his whole heart and most of his shoulder. She reads the note aloud for Delia. It is painfully misspelled. It says, Stanley 50 birthday portrait. Him wanted make gifs, but has no hands. Your friend, Cy.
A 50 birthday portrait for a goldfish named Stanley. And Cyrus, operating under the deeply sweet, slightly confused belief that a goldfish would desperately want to give his friend's party favors, but is physically hindered by a lack of hands, has taken it upon himself to provide the gifts on Stanley's behalf.
Exactly. So Medusa begins untying the trine. And even this takes time because Cyrus ties knots as a philosophical position.
I love that.
He creates these massive loops that serve absolutely no structural purpose, tied purely for confidence. Finally, she opens the thick paper, and she falls into a completely new kind of silence. The text is very specific here.
Yeah, Delia knows Medusa's silences. She knows the thin silence of irritation, the deep silence of creative thought, the hollow silence reserved for foolish clients. But this is a silence Delia has never encountered. Delia asks, is it bad? Medusa says no. Delia asks, is it good? Medusa says no.
And Medusa slowly pulls the items from the box. They are sweaters. Specifically, they are horribly cheerful, incredibly badly stitched, dark gray wool sweaters, each featuring a massive, violently yellow smiley face on the front.
The craftsmanship is aggressively terrible. Like, the yellow eyes on the smiley face don't match. The mouth starts out looking cheerful on the left side and slowly devolves into a panicked grimace on the right.
Like a total disaster.
Medusa holds it up and refers to it as clothing in the loosest possible sense of the word. She identifies one massive sweater for herself, a slightly smaller one for Delia, where the yellow smile leans heavily to the left as if the face is experiencing a mild medical event. And then she pulls out the third sweater.
The third sweater has 4 leg holes.
Oh my gosh. It is intended for old Brutus.
Yeah.
And the yellow smile on his sweater is positioned so that, when worn, it will beam directly from between his shoulder blades with aggressive, inescapable optimism.
Poor Brutus.
Medusa looks down at the ancient, morally inflexible wolf dog under the table and says, no, absolutely not. You have never worn clothing in your life. You are a creature of dignity.
But Brutus, who has apparently abandoned his dignity the moment he realized the package contained warm wool instead of food, slowly stands up. He looks at the sweater with the solemn determination of an old creature who has identified a heat source and fully intends to occupy it.
He doesn't care what it looks like.
Not at all. Medusa calls him a traitor to his wild ancestry, and Delia just loses it. She lets out this beautiful, bright, startled laugh that fills the kitchen.
It's an incredibly funny domestic moment, but underneath the comedy of the terrible sweaters is a massive, glowing neon sign of a logical inconsistency. Delia, after catching her breath, points out the glaring biological reality of the invitation. Goldfish do not live for 50 years. The biological maximum is maybe a decade, and that's pushing it in perfect conditions. Stanley should be dust.
And this is where Medusa drops the veil on the grand conspiracy. She calmly explains to her blind assistant that Stanley has, in fact, died dozens of times. They are currently on Stanley number 90-something. Whenever Stanley expires, a highly coordinated protocol kicks in. Virgil the Vulture is quietly dispatched to remove the body, and Gus the Pegasus acquires and delivers a biologically identical replacement before Cyrus ever notices.
Which is just... Delia's mind is completely blown by the scale of this.
Yeah.
She asks the question any logical person would ask, why not just tell him? Why go through this elaborate, high-risk, decades-long lie? Wouldn't it be healthier for Cyrus to just learn about the cycle of life and death? Like, why coddle him?
And Medusa's answer to this cuts right to the philosophical core of the entire text. It recontextualizes everything we've learned about how she handles memory in the owl room. Medusa says, quite simply, because Cyrus loves Stanley. She elaborates, telling Delia that humans have this obsession with the idea that grief is ennobling, that suffering builds character. Medusa, having lived for thousands of years, knows this is a lie. She says that grief does not always improve a person. Sometimes it just breaks them.
She describes Cyrus's heart as being so open that the world tracks mud into it without even removing its boots. She's saying that Cyrus is too gentle, too pure for the constant grinding churn of loss. So if his friends can lay a mat down for him now and then, if they can absorb the blow of that grief on his behalf, they do.
We constantly hear in modern discourse that you shouldn't lie to your friends, that forcing people to face harsh realities makes them resilient. Medusa rejects that completely. This isn't about coddling Cyrus. It is an active, fiercely protective, almost militant kind of love. It is a massive conspiracy of kindness.
A conspiracy of kindness, yeah.
Delia immediately understands the assignment. She asks for the rules of the fiction. Medusa lays them out. You never mention replacements. You never question Stanley's age or biological improbability. And if Cyrus asks, you always say Stanley looks splendid.
It's a beautiful sentiment, but sentiment alone doesn't keep a 90-fish conspiracy running for half a century.
No, it does not.
Maintaining a social fiction of this magnitude requires cosmic-level logistical infrastructure. You can't just buy immortality at the corner store, especially not when you are a mythological titan living in exile. Medusa might enforce the boundary locally, but she needs a supplier. which forces us to look at how the rest of the mythological world is complicit in this lie. Let's pivot to Mount Olympus, and let's talk about Gus.
Gus the Pegasus. He is a phenomenal character. When we shift to Mount Olympus, the text introduces us to heavenly hooves. And this is not a stable. It is a high-end luxury auction house, art dealership, and bespoke delivery operation run exclusively by Gus.
He's basically a CEO.
Pretty much. Gus is incredibly vain, impeccably groomed, and obsessed to a pathological degree with professional aesthetics.
When we first meet him, he is standing beside a miniature marble architectural model of Hercules' planned retirement estate. He is in the middle of a heated argument with his receptionist, Chiron the Centaur, about the sheer tackiness of Hercules' design choices.
Because Gus is deeply offended that Hercules wants 12 fountains of himself rearing up in triumph. Gus considers it lazy, vulgar, and aesthetically aggressive. He literally tells Chiron, "It is a bathhouse, Chiron, not a threat."
Gus's entire brand is built on dignity, restraint, and classical taste. His wings are folded with what Bard calls sculptural patience. He wears a white coat that is brushed until it catches the ambient light like a polished cloud. He views himself as the ultimate arbiter of taste on Olympus.
And right into the middle of this pristine temple of high-end aesthetics flies Virgil the vulture.
Who is completely ruined by the rain.
Yes. Virgil is soaked from the rain, smelling of wet feathers and dead things, entirely ruining the vibe of heavenly hooves. He drops Cyrus's brown paper parcel on the immaculate marble floor, stares unblinkingly at Gus until Gus is forced to formally acknowledge the delivery with a tight nod of appreciation, and then Virgil flies off.
Chiron, the ever-efficient centaur, opens the envelope first. He reads the terribly spelled invitation for the 50th birthday patry. And in a rare break from his composed aesthetic, Gus lets out this massive, bright, echoing laugh that completely startles the junior assistants working in the gallery. Then Chiron opens the actual package to reveal Gus's gifts.
And it contains the leg warmers.
Oh boy.
4 violently bright, intentionally mismatched rainbow leg warmers with tassels. One is pink and yellow, one is blue and green, another is a chaotic orange. None of the stripes line up. The tension is all wrong. One flares out at the bottom like a trumpet, while another narrows tightly for absolutely no structural reason.
It's chaos.
And to complete the ensemble, there is a matching braided rainbow headband with actual silver bells woven into it. The accompanying note from Cyrus reads, "For Gus legs, it's fashion. Stanley pick colors."
Gus stares at them in absolute paralyzed horror. To Gus, this isn't just an ugly gift. It is an aesthetic crime committed in sequence against his person.
It truly is.
It is the ultimate clash of worlds. Think about it like this. Imagine an avant-garde, high-fashion designer who only wears bespoke, monochromatic silk suits tailored in Milan. Now imagine someone hands that designer a lumpy, brightly painted macaroni necklace held together with dry glue and tells them they are required to wear it on the red carpet at the Met Gala.
They would pass out.
Gus's entire identity is bound up in his dignity, and these rainbow leg warmers are the weaponized antithesis of that dignity.
He is physically repulsed by them. But this scene does more than just play the leg warmers for comedy. It serves to reveal the actual hidden mechanics of the Stanley recycling operation. Recovering from the shock of the fashion, Gus asks Chiron a highly classified question. Which Stanley are we on?
Chiron freezes. He realizes that a seemingly casual question has just unlocked a massive operational secret. Gus sighs, realizes he has to bring his receptionist into the fold, and leads Chiron to the very back of the studio. They walk past the auctions, past the art, to a locked door hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain.
Right.
It's a cool, shaded storage room meant for highly valuable, climate-sensitive inventory. Gus walks to a rear shelf and pulls away a silk cloth. And there, sitting in a neat row, are 6 round glass bowls.
Stanley's 93 through 98. 6 identical goldfish, just swimming in quiet circles, blissfully unaware that they are the backup clones in a mythological conspiracy.
It's amazing.
Chiron is absolutely stunned. He's a centaur. He is used to the complex, lethal plotting of gods and kings on Olympus. He immediately assumes the bowls are some sort of arcane political signal system or coded leverage involving the Senate and Poseidon.
Chiron's mind goes straight to espionage, and Gus just waves him off. Gus says, "I am not the least bit interested in politics, Chiron. The pay is positively dreadful. It's not a coup. It is simply, in Gus's words, ornamental aquatic continuity." And to prove it, Gus pulls out a massive leather-bound ledger.
And I want to dig deeply into this ledger because it is the most revealing character detail we get for Gus. Gus has created a literal binding contract for replacing a dying goldfish.
A literal contract.
Yes, the contract is officially titled Ornamental Aquatic Continuity, Private. It is formally signed with a bloody claw mark from Virgil the Vulture and a stamped hoofprint from Gus. It details a standing order of 5 Stanley-grade goldfish, currently temporarily expanded to 6 due to an unforeseen heron incident last spring, to be maintained on premises at all times.
It specifies that the backups are to be deployed in the event of suspicious floating, excessive stillness, or other structural disruptions to Stanley. And here's the kicker. The contract stipulates a flat rate of exactly 1 gold coin per fish.
And Chiron, doing the math in his head, immediately calls Gus out on the absurdity of this pricing structure. 1 gold coin for the procurement of a specific breed of fish, the climate-controlled storage on Olympus, the coordination of emergency delivery with a giant vulture, and 50 years of continuous maintenance.
It's insane.
Chiron looks at his boss and says, "Sir, this is charity."
And Gus aggressively, almost hostilely, denies it. He snaps back. It is absolutely not charity, Chiron. It is a highly negotiated, long-term supply arrangement conducted at an offensively reduced margin for the emotional convenience of a valued associate.
Which is just a brilliant piece of psychological armor. Notice the sterile, bureaucratic language Gus uses to describe his own kindness. He hides his deep, sentimental loyalty behind layers of corporate paperwork, incident reports, and imaginary friends and family discounts.
Because Gus is too proud to simply admit that he is doing all of this out of pure, unadulterated love for Cyrus.
Exactly. He needs the ledger. He needs it to look like a grueling business transaction so he doesn't have to confront the terrifying depth of his own empathy.
It's the exact inverse of Medusa's owls. Medusa curates her trauma in tight little knots so she doesn't lose herself. And Gus curates his massive, overwhelming capacity for love in a spreadsheet so he doesn't feel vulnerable. The ledger even contains incident notes. He has documented every close call.
Oh, the close calls are the best part.
Right, like Stanley 34 had to be replaced during a massive thunderstorm. Stanley 71 through 76 had to be rapidly hidden behind a display of commemorative Spartan shields when Cyrus made an unscheduled visit to Olympus, and Medusa had to fake a severe respiratory event to distract him. It's a highly coordinated, high-stress, Black Ops mission executed solely to protect one gentle giant's feelings.
It is. And with the backup Stanleys fed and the logistical continuity secured, Gus and Chiron turn to their final problem. They have to figure out a gift. You don't bring something practical to a goldfish's 50th birthday party. You bring something tasteful. Gus, true to his vanity, initially suggests a massive 12-foot oil portrait of himself in mid-flight. When that fails, he suggests a bronze sculpture of himself, or perhaps a fountain of himself rearing in waves.
He is completely, unironically serious about giving a fish a statue of himself.
He really is.
But Chiron, ever the pragmatist, shoots them all down. He points out that the glass bowl wouldn't support the weight of the bronze, and the fish would have nowhere left to swim. They're stumped. And then they spot one of the terrified junior assistants in the gallery, feed-in assistant 448, wearing a keychain.
It's a tiny, intricate clamshell charm modeled after Poseidon's summer residence. A miniature underwater palace. Gus hones in on it like a hawk. He practically interrogates the poor assistant through Chiron.
He demands to know the material composition of the charm. He asks if it's real pearl. The assistant stammers, explaining that there are 2 versions in the Olympus gift shop. The expensive version has real pearl, gold detailing, and blue sea glass. The cheaper version is made of painted clay.
And Gus physically recoils at the words painted clay.
He does. The idea of painted clay existing on Olympus offends him on a cellular level. He orders the assistant to go buy the expensive version immediately. He yells after him, no clay, no compromise, and no Trident bottle openers attached to it.
They plan to carefully remove the metal chain so Stanley can use the tiny palace as high-end bowl decor. It's the perfect gift. But the real compromise of this scene isn't the gift, it's the outfit. Gus looks back at the brown paper package. He looks at the violently bright tasseled rainbow leg warmers. They clash with his pristine white coat. They ruin the aerodynamic line of his mane. They destroy his brand, and they violate several fundamental principles of classical civilization.
He stares at them for a long time. And then he sighs, and he agrees to wear them. He even agrees to wear the braided rainbow headband with the silver bells, though he heavily stipulates to Chiron that he will only wear the headband for the initial toast, and he reserves the absolute right to remove it immediately if Wally the Minotaur starts singing. But he puts them on.
He puts them on.
He does it because he knows Cyrus is waiting on an island right now with a listing cake, a glass bowl, and a belief so complete and pure that even the brutal truth of biology agreed to bend around it. Gus loves Cyrus, so Gus will wear the rainbow disgrace.
This is the moment where all the disparate threads of the story, Medusa's boundaries, Delia's trust, Gus's bureaucracy, finally pull together. The logistics are settled, the terrible outfits are donned, and the entire mythical ensemble converges on Cyclops Island for the main event.
The 50th birthday party.
Yeah.
I want to spend time painting this scene because visually, it is an absolute masterpiece of chaotic, beautiful joy. It is mid-afternoon on Cyclops Island. The rain has stopped, leaving the grass impossibly green. Cyrus has decorated his yard, and by decorated I mean he has enthusiastically tied primary color party hats to 14 heavily confused sheep, 3 fence posts, and to Virgil.
Yes. Virgil, the fearsome Death Harbinger vulture, is currently sitting on a wooden fence rail with a bright blue paper hat tied securely under his beak with an optimistic yellow ribbon. And because Virgil is a professional who respects the terms of his contract, he is just accepting the indignity with stern, unblinking neutrality.
There are bright red and yellow streamers strung haphazardly between the trees. There is a massive, hand-painted banner strung between 2 posts that reads, "Happy 50 Birthday Stanley," with half the letters leaning dangerously backward. And in the very center of the yard, resting on a table covered in a heavily embroidered cloth, is Stanley the goldfish in his bowl, surrounded by polished seashells and tiny unlit candles.
Cyrus leaning over the bowl, whispering, "Big day, Stan, big day."
It is so incredibly sweet. And then the guests start arriving.
First to arrive is Gus. He descends from the clouds in magnificent sunlit splendor. His white wings are spread wide, catching the golden hour light. His hooves reach out for a perfect statuesque landing, and the entire majestic image is instantly violently ruined by the flapping, mismatched rainbow leg warmers.
Cyrus gasps in absolute delight, points a massive finger at the legs, and yells, "Fashion." Gus, immediately defensive and vibrating with aesthetic shame, replies, "Yes, Cyrus, I am aware. It is fashion." But he keeps them on. Then we hear this rhythmic, theatrical jingling of bells from down the dirt road, and in walks Wally.
Wally, the Minotaur. And the text gives us some incredible context for Wally in a previous chapter. Wally is not a beast. He is a highly trained, deeply dramatic working actor who lives in a labyrinth primarily because it offers great acoustics and who treats every interaction as a literal stage performance. He approaches life with intense theatrical rigor.
And Wally arrives wearing the crocheted horn warmers Cyrus sent him. They are reddish-brown yarn cones with massive yellow tassels and silver bells on the ends. One cone is noticeably longer than the other, giving him a lopsided, floppy appearance. Every time he breathes, the bells jingle. He stops at the gate, strikes a dramatic, tragic pose, and allows the wind to gently move the ridiculous tassels.
Cyrus is overjoyed and asks if his horns are warm. Wally, a creature who normally cannot stand a lack of dramatic dignity, looks at Cyrus's radiant, beaming face, breaks character for just a second, and softly says, "Yes, Cyrus, they are very warm."
And then the air in the center of the yard shimmers, folding in on itself, and Medusa arrives via magic mirror, bringing Delia and old Brutus with her. I love how the text casually tosses in the magic mirror. The mechanics of it are wild, folding space and time to step across the age and sea in an instant. It's the highest, most epic form of mythological travel imaginable, and she uses this reality-bending magic simply to avoid being late for a goldfish's birthday party.
Priorities.
Exactly. She steps through the portal. She is wearing a pristine, flowing white veil over her head and face, which looks like it belongs in a sacred royal ceremony. But beneath the veil, she's wearing the horrific, badly stitched, dark gray wool sweater with the lopsided yellow smiley face.
Old Brutus waddles through the portal next, wearing his four-legged sweater, looking exactly like a deeply disgruntled stuffed sausage. Delia steps through wearing hers. The visual impact of this group standing together in the yard is staggering.
We really need to pause and appreciate the sheer, jarring beauty of this image. If you saw this group on paper, you would expect an apocalypse. You have a Gorgon whose gaze turns armies to stone, a Minotaur who supposedly devours heroes in the dark, a Pegasus born from the blood of a Titan, and a Cyclops who hurls mountains at ships. These are the Titans of classical myth. These are the creatures that empires flee from. They have been written into human history as living nightmares. And here they are, standing in a muddy yard, surrounded by party hat-wearing sheep, jingling bells, and terrible sweaters. They have entirely surrendered their dignity, their taste, their fearsome reputations, and their pride, solely for the sake of making their friends smile.
It is the ultimate expression of found family love. Wally turns to Delia and whispers, "We have achieved magnificence and surrendered taste." Medusa tells Cyrus that one must attend a formal occasion properly dressed. They don't just show up to humor him, they fully commit to the bit. They commit to the reality Cyrus has built.
And the party is a massive success. They play yard games, they play ring toss using heavy wooden tridents. There's a brilliant moment where Medusa, relying entirely on Delia's whispered spatial description of the yard, casually underhand throws a heavy ring and lands it perfectly over the center trident on his first try, which absolutely terrifies Wally.
Natural.
Virgil acts as the event's silent security bouncer, professionally removing a confused sheep that wanders onto the beanbag toss. Chiron gracefully pours the good wine. They present Gus's gift, the real pearl miniature palace, and Cyrus gently, with massive, careful fingers, drops it into Stanley's bowl. It sinks among the smooth stones, and the real pearl catches the afternoon light. Cyrus is overwhelmed with gratitude.
And then comes the cake. Cyrus brings it out. It is leaning dangerously to the west, listing like it's structurally compromised, with Stanley written across the top in thick blue sugar frosting. Cyrus painstakingly lights 50 tiny individual candles. It takes him so long that by the time he reaches the 50th, the first 10 have already burned down to the frosting, and the ensemble sings.
They sing Happy Birthday, and it is an acoustic disaster. Wally sings with full, booming theatrical placement, treating it like an opera. Gus sings perfectly on pitch, but with the tight, strained voice of a horse being forced to perform. Medusa sings softly and dryly. Old Brutus just snores rhythmically under the table. And Virgil lets out a horrific death rattle croak at the end of every single line.
Oh, wow.
It is a terrifying, discordant disaster of a choir, but to Cyrus, it is perfect. The song ends. Cyrus looks down at the bowl and tells Stanley to make a wish.
The yard goes silent. Stanley the goldfish swims in a small circle, opens his little mouth, and a single tiny bubble rises to the surface and pops.
Cyrus claps his massive hands and says, "Good wish." Delia, smiling, asks him what he thinks the fish wished for, and Cyrus pauses. He looks up. He looks around the yard. He looks at Gus vibrating with shame in his rainbow leg warmers. He looks at Wally with yellow yarn bells hanging off his lethal horns. He looks at Medusa wearing a wedding veil and a tragic smiley sweater. He looks at Brutus asleep, Virgil standing guard, the sheep in their hats, the crooked banner, the leaning cake, and the little pearl palace in the water. He takes it all in. He smiles gently. He says, "Got it." He knows he already has everything he could possibly want.
It is a moment of pure, unadulterated, profound contentment. And this beautiful, ridiculous, absurd moment in the yard forces us, the readers, to pull the lens way back. It forces us to look at the larger thematic North Star of Wilson H. Bard's entire series. We have to ask a massive sociological question. Who are these creatures actually, compared to what the world violently believes they are?
We have to look at the core inversion of the myth. The entire world fears them as monsters. Humanity cowers from them, writing epics about beasts that lurk in the dark, waiting to devour innocent heroes. But look at the reality we just witnessed. Medusa isn't a predator. She is a meticulous artist and a tired small business owner who provides a safe, accessible workplace for a blind woman.
Exactly.
Wally isn't a bloodthirsty brute. He is a theater kid obsessed with stage blocking who, as we learned in an earlier chapter, secretly mapped out an escape route for children lost in the labyrinth. Gus is a bureaucratic auctioneer who masks his massive empathy with spreadsheets. Cyrus is a gentle, emotionally fragile shepherd who throws elaborate birthday parties for a constantly dying fish.
The disconnect between their reality and their reputation is staggering.
Which brings up a massive question that I kept asking myself while reading this. If they are so capable, so intelligent, and fundamentally so kind, why do they hide? Why don't they fight back against the narrative? Medusa runs a business, Gus has capital. Why not just run a massive mythological PR campaign? Why live on hidden islands or under throne rooms? Why not just walk into Athens and show the world that they are actually the good guys?
I see where you're going with the PR idea, but let's push that logic further into the text's philosophy. Consider the alternative. What happens if they do show themselves as kind? The true danger in this world, according to Bard, isn't the creatures. The danger is the institutions of humanity.
How so?
Think about the kings. King Minos of Crete, for example, needs a minotaur. Kings need villains to justify their own absolute power, to justify their military budgets, their violence, and their own fabricated heroism. If the terrifying minotaur in the maze is actually just a guy named Wally who likes theater and crochets, then the king can't claim divine glory for trapping him or sending young heroes to fight him.
Wow, that completely shifts the blame. The institutions literally need them to be monsters.
Exactly. As the text states beautifully in the prologue, history is written by whoever arrives with a throne, a grudge, or an audience to please. The monsters don't hide because they are ashamed of what they are. They hide because humanity's desperate structural need for a villain is far more dangerous and far more violent than any magical curse they carry. They can't PR their way out of a system that requires their subjugation to function.
Humanity's need for a villain. That is a brutal realization. The system is entirely rigged to cast them as the bad guys, no matter how many sweaters they knit. The stories, the statues in the museums, the epics, they're all controlled by the people in power.
Mhm.
The people in power need the population to be afraid of the dark, because fearful people are compliant people.
Precisely. And understanding that political reality fundamentally changes how we view this birthday party. Their chosen family, their little gatherings like this one on Cyclops Island, are not just cute, cozy domestic moments. They are profound acts of political defiance.
Yes, because simply existing in joy is a rebellion.
Choosing to care for each other, choosing to be gentle, choosing to invest time and money into a birthday party for a fish in a world that insists they are savage, unfeeling beasts. That is their greatest triumph. They've built a micro-community where they are truly seen, where Delia can navigate safely in the dark, where Gus can be secretly charitable, where Cyrus can be soft. They are actively rejecting the violent, false narratives forced upon them by human kings.
They had to create their own world because the real one wouldn't let them exist in peace. So what does this all mean for us? We started this deep dive talking about how history is usually presented as a cold, marble statue, pristine, serious, binary, and terrifying. But diving into the absurdity of this goldfish birthday party has revealed something so much deeper.
It really has.
It has shown us profound truths about how we curate and survive our own complex memories, how we construct elaborate lies to protect the fragile hearts of the people we love, and how true, fierce loyalty sometimes looks exactly like wearing a tasseled rainbow leg warmer when you absolutely hate it.
We've seen the extraordinary lengths this chosen family goes to just to preserve a single fleeting moment of joy for Cyrus. They willingly endure massive inconvenience, financial expense, and total aesthetic humiliation, all to uphold a fiction that keeps their friend's gentle world intact against the harshness of reality.
It's a blueprint for how to love your friends. It really is.
It is. But if we accept that these monsters are actually just marginalized people forced into hiding by corrupt institutions that needed a scapegoat, it leaves us with a much more uncomfortable question to explore on our own.
What's that?
If the terrifying beasts of our legends were actually just artists, actors, and shepherds trying to survive, what does that make the legendary, violent heroes who hunted them down? The people we have spent centuries building pristine marble statues of might just be the actual monsters of the story?
Oh, that is a chilling thought to walk away with. The heroes are the hitmen of the state. Remember, the statues in the museum only ever tell the story the sculptor was paid to let you see. The real story is always messier, warmer, and usually involves a lot more yarn. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
That's this deep dive. If this is your first time with Monsters Maybe, the books are available in paperback and hardcover on Amazon and Walmart, free to read on Kindle Unlimited, and an audiobook on Spotify and Apple Books. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow the show so the next deep dive lands automatically. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and ring the bell. A quick rating or review helps more than you'd think. We'll see you next time in the world of monsters. Maybe.
Read Monsters Maybe by Wilson H. Bard, available at Walmart and on Amazon. Or read it for free with Kindle Unlimited.